Dieselgate was possibly, when the history of the auto industry is written, that one single moment that spelt the death knell of diesel.
In the first 10 months or 9 months, market is flattish to about -1 to +1 range. The diesel share or the diesel market has grown by 8%.
I think these companies which exited diesel are kicking themselves because they really didn't need to at that time.
While you spoke about many of these car makers exiting diesel, it happened at a time when market was actually veering in favor of SUVs, which a lot of people love driving with a diesel powertrain.
I think SUV without diesel is like rice without curry. Should your next car be a diesel? That's what we're going to discuss on this week's episode of Deep Drive, powered by Kotak Mahindra Prime. I'm Hormazd Sorabjee.
Hi, I'm Ketan Thakkar. Hormazd, a pertinent issue that is being discussed in automotive corridors very frequently. Kicking off, it has been a fuel of choice for millions of Indian buyers over the years. And I still remember way back in 2010-11 when there was an artificial gap in pricing of petrol and diesel, and the entire market was heavily going in favor of diesel. So I'd like to give a little bit of recap for our viewers and listeners as to how India used to drive predominantly on diesel. So way back in 2011, the share of diesel was 43%. And as the price gap grew, it went up to almost 54%.
When was that?
This was calendar year 2012.
2012, it was 54% of diesel market.
That's correct. And for almost last decade, till the time you saw the BS6 emission norms kick in, by the end of this decade, by the end of 2020, it was about 33%. And after that,
a sharp drop.
There was a sharp drop, and we all know the reason why. Yeah. Market leader Maruti Suzuki decided to drop out of diesel. And
I think at that time, diesel was about 30% of Maruti sales.
Absolutely. And I still recall...
And I don't think they decided, Ketan, we did a podcast on it.
Yes.
They had a technical problem with the engine and they were forced out of it. So,
yes.
But anyway, they dropped out of diesel. But what I'd like to pitch in over there is, I think we did a story. So many diesels went out of the market. Toyota, no diesel. Honda, no diesel. Volkswagen, no diesel. Right. Renault, Nissan, no diesel. All these, companies which had strong diesel engines, they went out. Of course, Maruti was the biggest chunk by their sheer volume. But so many diesels went out of the market and just a handful of left. No wonder the market share dropped. And you were saying it dropped from about 33 to about...
So over the last 4 years, we've been consistently seeing about 18 to 19% of the overall annual volumes. And while you spoke about many of these car makers exiting diesel, it happened at a time when market was actually veering in favor of SUVs, which a lot of people love driving with a diesel powertrain. And that was a surprise. And I know, and with regards to Maruti Suzuki, another interesting fact that I'd like to tell you, Maruti had hit a share of 50% in FY18 or FY19. And it seemed like, the brand is absolutely invincible and it is going to go from strength to strength with many more future cars coming. But clearly, we saw what happened after the exit from diesel.
Their market share dropped because of their exit from diesel. There's no doubt about that.
Absolutely. And today, while the company has been trying very hard with its SUVs, with hybrids, the market share is still around 40 to 43%. The aspiration is 50%, but without a diesel, it's actually a tough ask.
Yeah, especially with SUVs. As you rightly said, if you're buying an SUV, a diesel is so intrinsic to me. I think SUV without diesel is like rice without curry, so, or with an idli with no sambar. But, it's just a marriage which works well in SUVs purely because you've got that low-end torque. And I'm talking about the bigger SUVs.
Right.
I've seen the smaller ones. People are veering more towards petrol. That's a general trend we've seen globally. But in the mid-size SUV and up, it's diesel which really works, and for multiple reasons. It's got the torque. Diesels are super refined right now. They've got the economy as well, and with that economy comes long range. So clearly, I think diesels are really, intrinsic to SUVs, and I think these companies which exited diesel are kicking themselves because they really didn't need to at that time. I think it was a lot of knee-jerk after especially for the Europeans after Dieselgate. of 2015. I think Dieselgate was possibly, when the history of the auto industry is written, that one single moment that spelt the death knell of diesel. It's not dead yet, but of course it gave it a crippling blow from which it has never recovered. And globally, there's a strong decline in diesel. But again, I think, India will be last man standing in diesel. There was Europe and India. Gone down in India as well because of emission norms. And I think like Dieselgate had an issue in Europe, I think for India, it is, the courts, NGT, the authorities which are trying to kill diesel. And if you see in India, I think the single biggest blow has been some really unreasonable judgments, whether it's been from the Supreme Court, the 2-liter diesel ban, which made no logical sense at all. And these are all knee-jerk reactions which happen every November and December when the air quality becomes dismal in the NCR. And it's fundamentally just an NCR issue, more and more. But then that's really where all the policy is driven from. That's the power center of the country, and then policy emanates from, all those people affected in the NCR. So diesel has got a tricky kind of in a situation, and you never know. I mean, today I think there are people a lot more sensible, realizing that a BS 6.2 diesel is actually pretty clean. But it's always a popular thing, when the air quality goes down, first thing is just ban the diesel. It's just simple as that, with no logic applied whatsoever, that a 10-year-old petrol can be much more polluting than a modern diesel. But people don't. It's sometimes the popular decisions which take precedence over what is rational and logical and technically right.
And you mentioned about Dieselgate. I'd like to get your view. Do you think that Dieselgate had any defining role when it came to Indian market?
Well, I think it definitely did, because I think those and those diesel haters in India, which that gave them serious fodder to show that how diesel really is the bad guy, and how Volkswagen cheated in it, and clearly the emission levels were ridiculously high. And don't forget, diesel was once the darling of Europe, because from a CO2 perspective, it's much lower. But there are other issues like NOx and particulate matter, which are much higher in diesel. HC is actually lower in diesel, CO and HC, which are actually lower in diesel. So I think that was why it was popular. Then they found diesel, what Volkswagen did. So diesel has been vilified after that. It's become fashionable with politicians also to knock diesel, globally. People saying that we'll ban them from the center of our seats. So it's become like, one of those grandstanding things where people don't understand the technology, but they want to say that, diesel is bad. I'll never forget one very eminent doctor from Breach Candy Hospital, don't want to take his name, wanted to buy at that time a Brezza. I'm talking, just before
2018, 2019.
Yeah. And I said, diesel Brezza is good enough for your running. He said, I will never buy a diesel because it's extremely polluting and killing. So I said, why? Can you explain to me, do you know the values of what the pollutants are? Absolutely no clue. So it was this
doctor.
Yeah. So I mean, he wanted to. You were seen to be cool if you kind of knock diesel. As right now it's really the trend in social media. I'm not trying to say diesel is good. Diesel historically has been a very dirty fuel. There's no doubt about it, because pre BS4, BS3, they really were, let's say, really had carcinogens, with the high particulate matter which goes into your lungs and causes cancer. So no doubt they were dirty. You could visibly see the soot and the smoke coming out. But unfortunately, that has, kind of given a varnish on diesel, a dirty varnish that even a clean diesel is, let's say, put in the same bucket as the old dirty diesels. So no doubt the diesels were very, very dirty.
So almost 2012 was when the diesel share was at its peak, and there was this one engine that kind of changed the entire landscape of Indian diesel car market. 1.3 multijet. Help us understand.
1.3 multijet, actually it was 1248 cc, so technically closer to 1.2 if you round it off, but it was a 1.3. Really, this was what a lot of people call the national diesel of India. Wow. If you look at it at its peak, one engine, 5 brands,
wow,
and 24 products.
Insane.
And the brands range from GM, because with GM actually they had a partnership with this engine. They jointly developed it. The IP was the same. They even had a 3-cylinder version which went into the Beat diesel. Those were really
1-liter diesel.
Yeah, that's the real heydays of diesel at that time. So you had GM, you had Tata, you had Fiat, of course. So I mean, there were a lot of engines being used, and the 24 models is what we had counted before it went. And so I think, and of course Maruti, this was their play. And if you see at its peak, the delta in price Maruti commanded, I think, was 120,000 between a petrol and a diesel.
Wow.
So they were really taking advantage of the diesel demand, driven by the disparity in prices and the fact that, people were enjoying this punchy, very economical and very reliable diesel. It was a fantastic diesel. Not very refined, but had a lovely mid-range torque. And it had two versions. It had a 90 horsepower and 75 horsepower. With a fixed geometry turbo, variable geometry turbo. I mean, I love that diesel engine. And so really it was, it kind of democratized diesel. There's no doubt about it. And what's interesting is that it was a Fiat engine, but the tuning Maruti did was even better than Fiat and its own engines. So I think they ran the best in the Maruti cars. And I think everyone tried them. I think even Tata did it, and then Tata finally had a joint venture with them.
Yes.
And part of the joint venture was the Fiat diesel going into the Vista at that time. And then the Bolt, of course. So I think really, I mean, we have a lot, Fiat not very successful in selling cars in India, but
that's phenomenal. I mean, to me, that's the most interesting point. For almost a decade and a half or almost 2 decades, they've made more money selling diesel engines rather than selling cars in the country.
Exactly.
And even now with Stellantis, the way they are churning out engines for Tata Motors and MG.
That's right.
I mean, they're making more money out of it rather than selling cars in the country.
Exactly. So I think that engine really, and it goes back to show that diesels really, it's been, how do I say, it's the Europeans which have really kind of owned that technology and been best at that technology, and has been the Europe which finally killed that technology as well.
But Hormazd, help me understand, what's the pollution profile like of diesel vehicles? Probably BS4, BS6. If you could help us understand.
So I think first we need to understand, just a little bit of basics of internal combustion, whether it's petrol or diesel. What you're burning is a hydrocarbon. That's what it is. A hydrocarbon means hydrogen and carbon in quite a complex chain. So then when you burn that with oxygen in the engine, you ideally should get carbon dioxide. That's not poisonous. That's a global warming issue which is completely separate. So I think the two should not be mixed up. CO2 is not bad for your health. It's bad for the climate. It's bad for the, let's say, environment. And actually, it is public enemy number 1 today, CO2, because we are seeing global warming. So it's actually the biggest enemy, though it is not bad for your health. What's bad for your health? So you get CO2 and water. That is the perfect kind of combustion all engine manufacturers strive for. So hydrocarbon, it could be, whatever, C6, H12, whatever mix there is, in plus O2, which is oxygen, and what should ideally come out is CO2 plus H2O, water, which is ideal, but it's never ideal.
Right.
What happens is that the combustion is not complete. So sometimes you get unburnt hydrocarbons, which again is a pollutant. Then you get carbon monoxide, which is very deadly. It's like a poisonous gas. And then there's another tricky thing which happens. You've got nitrogen in the air, which N2 should come out as N2, but it doesn't. With high combustion temperatures, the nitrogen then mixes with the oxygen in the air, and you get NOx, NOx, or oxides of nitrogen.
Okay.
So, you can get nitrogen dioxide or nitrogen monoxide. So all these are very, very, let's say, harmful for health. And in addition, in diesel, you get these very tiny particulate matters, which are really kind of as a byproduct of the combustion, which, that they're so microscopic, they go into your lungs and they can cause cancer.
Right.
So different, but diesels are very low on CO, carbon monoxide and hydrocarbons, but very high on NOx and particulate matter.
Yeah.
So you need to control this. Now with BS6, with all the, let's say, technology that has come in, The particulate matter is controlled with a DPF. In BS6, from BS4 to BS6, it brought that down by 70 to 80%. So I have to say it is still there, but it's within controllable levels, but it's still higher than, let's say, a petrol. So particulate matter is still there, but it's really not as hazardous as it once was. And I think the NOx also has been controlled by what they call selective catalytic reduction.
SCR technology.
SCR technology, which basically, you inject urea into it, AdBlue, and then under temperature, it becomes ammonia, and then the ammonia let's say, reacts with the NOx and converts it. It reduces it. Reduction means taking the oxygen out. So NOx, the oxygen comes out and goes back to harmless nitrogen.
Right.
So that's really how it works. So you've got...
So much more cleaner in BS6 era, isn't it?
Much, much more cleaner, but it's a laboratory on wheels. You've got SCR technology on one side, you've got DPF on one side, and there are a lot of complications which actually come with that, which again we'll come to for consumers to know. But overall, what you've got is a super clean diesel engine. An engine that in a way is also more refined because the combustion process is more controlled. All the after treatment, it kind of muffles the exhaust, noise as well. So much more refined diesel which you get. What you lack actually is a bit of the mid-range punch which you used to get with BS4, that characteristic one.
Right.
I remember driving the new Scorpio N and the new Scorpio, and I really missed that punch, because the Scorpio was characteristic of that solid mid-range punch, and people loved it for that. It's not that it's slow, but it's more gradual, so it masks its speed a lot more.
Right.
And again, why is that mid-range punch more gradual? It's because, your peak emission profile, just to control the emissions, to keep that under control, you need a more gradual kind of a power delivery. So BS6 diesel, a complete laboratory on wheels is what I call. It's made it much more complex, much more expensive. And that's why we've seen that at the lower end, they've all disappeared because it's just not cost effective.
It's more expensive, isn't it?
Much more expensive. You just don't get the payoff. But in a diesel, in an SUV, and frankly, we've seen it with Mahindra. In fact, I think, Ketan, I'm going to toss to you.
Yeah.
I think Mahindra has ridden the diesel wave like no other OEM. And I would say they probably make the best diesel engines in their class by far.
Absolutely, Hormazd, phenomenal. I mean, they are, of the total sales, 80%, and of the diesel market, they are 53%. So clearly, 1 in every 2 diesel is a Mahindra diesel on road. Followed by Kia, which has a share of 33% in its total sales, but has a market share of 11%. Number 2 is Hyundai at 14%, and Tata and Toyota at around 10% of the diesel market. And very interesting fact, Hormazd, this year has been a year of consolidation. The overall market has remained flattish. In that market, the diesel volume has grown by 8%. And no surprises, Mahindra is the one who's driving the diesel market share. So clearly, I mean, with the market graduating to a lot more premium mid-size vehicles, diesel definitely has had a critical share, and it's likely to have a much more important role in the future as well. So my question to you is, should the future buyer look at a diesel vehicle?
Yeah, that's a good question, and that's really what this podcast is about. I think there are a lot of things to consider. One is, if you're in NCR, probably not, because clearly there's a 10-year kind of lifespan given to it. Again, stupidly, because, these cars are far, even after 10 years, they're still pretty clean, especially BS 6.2, which are really clean. So it doesn't make sense to, even after 10 years, not deregister them. And again, it's a stupid rule. Why have they done 10 years for diesel and 15 years for petrol? It doesn't make sense to me. Just like pull the figure out. If at anything, you should do it from an emission standpoint. You can say that no BS3 cars allowed. BS4, BS6 is fine, or BS2 not allowed.
So I take an emission scrapping of old vehicles.
So when you want to deregister, don't do it by age. Do it by, when the emission regulation change, because clearly a BS3 is not as clean as a BS4. That's the simplest way to do it. But, I think, as I said, certain policymakers, they just take their own decisions. So I think in the NCR, it's a bit challenging. I think if you're looking at a compact vehicle, again, it depends on what your running is. To me, one of the best compact SUVs is the Kia Sonet 1.5 diesel with the 6-speed 80.
Yeah.
I think a diesel matched with a torque converter is really the best package, because a torque converter really makes maximum use smoothly of a diesel's torque and really kind of gives you a very, very smooth power delivery and ride. So I think the Kia Sonet 1.5 is one of my favorite diesels. It's actually a Seltos diesel, same power in a much smaller package. So it goes like a rocket. It's super smooth, even smoother than the petrol.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I mean, I would take that over the petrol anyway, just for the way it drives. Forget about the fuel efficiency or whatever. And I think going into SUVs, clearly diesel has, let's say, a huge benefit, because generally with big SUVs, the petrol engines are so inefficient, especially if you look at, let's say, something like the Hector, which is giving you 5, 6 and 7. You would want a diesel over there, but the Hector doesn't have an automatic. Right. So, that's a disadvantage over there. And I think, again, coming back to Mahindra, that's where they wasted by giving a really good range of diesel. So no surprise that they got such a high penetration of diesel. So I think for me, the Mahindra diesels are really good. The Kia 1.5 diesel is good. I think even that's the same Hyundai diesel, very smooth and refined. I think, I think these are really the main diesel guys. And you've got, of course, Toyota, with the Crista, which is there with their 2.4, and of course the Fortuner. Strong diesel, Fortuner, super strong diesel, but not very refined, quite crude, but that torque it gives you and that sense of power, again, absolutely phenomenal. So really you've got these few stalwarts of diesel left. Tata also there in the diesel market, but I think that 2-liter Fiat diesel is really now feeling long in the tooth. It's still very gravelly. I think they were desperately trying to get more power out of it.
About time they acquire it from Fiat?
I think they should, because honestly, Fiat are done with that engine. And every time Tata wants any changes, they have to go to Fiat. I mean, to touch the ECU is some 10 million euros. That's really 80-90 crores, which is absurd. So you really don't have control of your engine the way you do. That's why Mahindra, you see, they have multiple modes, they have multiple power outputs. They can do all that because it's their own engine.
Yeah.
Tata Motors can't change the power output. It's one standard power output, because if they try to make too many changes, Fiat are going to give them a big fat bill. So I think the next step for them is, diesel is done in Europe. This engine has no application really in Europe anymore. I think Fiat should just get it. But again, there are challenges with that. We hear that Bosch may not be continuing to make the fuel pump. But I think, again, that can be sorted out. So net is, I think, even for Tata Motors, they have a long road ahead with their diesel. And, I think everyone in India, as I said, last man standing, will be, diesel cars will still have a substantial market share, I think even beyond 2030. But coming to your question again, which are the diesels, I think a handful, let's say, there are just a handful left. And, these are just the few of them that are remaining. Yeah.
Hormazd, I've heard there are some issues with DPF on diesel vehicles. Can you help us understand what are those issues?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ketan. I think the DPF issues are fundamentally in very low mileage, short-run city conditions, because the problem is with the DPF, the diesel particulate filter. Now, it needs to be regenerated. Regeneration over DPS is a process where, it kind of cleans out the soot and particulate matter that has been accumulated in the DPF over time. It kind of just, burns it off. But for that, the DPF has to heat up.
Right.
Now, there's something called passive regeneration to do this whole regeneration cycle of, burning off the soot and particulate matter into harmless stuff, which means you have to heat it out. Now, passive regeneration is when you drive the vehicle fast and under load. When you drive it hard and under load, the engine warms up and automatically heats up the DPF. Now, when that doesn't happen, there's active regeneration where fuel is injected into the DPF. It runs a bit rich, with that kind of ignites and heats it up. But, if you're doing very small mileages, even active regeneration is not enough. And, I was getting this data, like, let's say a city of like Bangalore. It's a huge problem, regeneration. Because in Bangalore traffic, average speeds have dropped from 20 kilometers to some 7-8 kilometers per hour. You're just idling half the time, which means your engine is just not heating up, and even the active regeneration can't go through a whole cycle. So then the soot starts
It leads to clogging of DPF.
Yeah, it starts accumulating and then sends to clog the DPF, which becomes a big problem. So
what's the solution to that?
So the solution to that is, ideally you should, at least on a weekend, take it for one solid run out of town, where it kind of, with the engine heat, it burns it off before it accumulates too much. That's what you have to do. But, a lot of people use it just for dropping kids to school. So it's sometimes can be just a 5-6 kilometer round trip, most of it in traffic. And then they don't go out of town. So then the DPF builds up. Then, you'll suddenly get a light on, which shows that, your DPF is about to clog. Then, you have to do what they call a service regeneration, or you have to do your own regeneration. Some cars now, they have it in the instrument cluster where, you can kind of activate the regen of it. But very often it just goes into limp mode and you have to go to a service station. So there are a lot of issues.
So simple solution is go out for a weekend drive.
Go out for a weekend drive is a simple solution. Drive your diesel hard. Get the passive regen, get the engine to heat up and burn off all the soot. That's what the regeneration is about. A cycle of, just cleaning out your DPF, which is done actually with high temperature because you need to burn that out. So really, if you're doing short runs, it doesn't make sense to buy a diesel, to be honest. Stick to a petrol or a hybrid or whatever. Hybrids work brilliantly in city traffic, or the best is an EV.
Right.
So I think EV really the opposite of diesel usage. You can't get them more poles apart. Diesel's phenomenal on the highway, mile munching. I love a diesel for a highway for two reasons. One is you get fantastic mileage.
Right.
You've got great torque for overtaking. And with that fantastic mileage, your range becomes that much more. So you can drive between fuel stops much, much longer.
Absolutely.
So I think there's nothing like a great diesel for the highway. And, when you get a range of 800-900 kilometers and then you can easily fill up, I mean, that's the sort of range an EV would die for. In fact, we just had the GLC 220 as our long-term car. And, I did one trip all the way to Dapoli, then to Mahabaleshwar and back, and, on one tank and had enough to spare. Now, that's the sort of range an EV guy would just die for. And really didn't cost that much because, it's fairly efficient. So diesels have an inherent fuel efficiency advantage over petrols, 25% more. So I think, that really is one big advantage.
Could you help our viewers understand about the role of AdBlue in the diesel vehicle?
Yeah, so as I said, DPF is to handle the PM, the particulate matter, PM 2.5, which is really the bad guy, which is now there are even smaller ones they call ultrafine particulate matter, which actually petrol engines are bad for that. Then they have GPFs, which are gasoline particulate filter, but that's a separate topic. But so you got the DPF for the PM and you've got the AdBlue to neutralize the NOx,
right,
which is really, again, very bad for health. Causes all kinds of irritations and problems and ailments if you have a high level of NOx inhalation. So what the AdBlue does is, you have to keep, it's basically, the technical term is diesel exhaust fluid, DEF.
Right.
AdBlue is more the brand name really, that's like Frigidaire is actually, brand name for a refrigerator.
Right.
So the diesel exhaust fluid, what it does is it kind of mixes. It's a urea-based thing, which, as I said earlier,
urea-based liquid. No?
Yeah, urea-based liquid, which gets into becomes ammonia, and then NH3, which combines with the NOx and reduces it, becomes nitrogen. So you have to keep, let's say, filling it into the urea tank, which then is injected in.
How frequently are they refilled?
About 10 to 15,000 kilometers is what they say. But it's good to have it with you. I think if you're going on a long trip, best to carry a tin. You get them, but again, they're very sensitive to temperature. Right. You've got to make sure you get a good quality one, with exact mix of urea. I think it's about 32%. It can degrade if the temperature is more than 30 degrees Celsius. So you've got to manage it quite well.
But these urea tanks, these urea fuel, AdBlue, AdBlue, it's available at petrol pumps nowadays.
It is available at petrol pumps, but there's worry of contamination.
Oh, okay.
And that can be a worry if you just buy it off the road. So I think it's just better to carry it with you, and that's a better solution.
So Hormazd, thank you very much for simplifying some of these technology for us. But post BS6, a company like Tata Motors decided to use the technology of LNT, Lean Nox Trap, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
Whereas you were explaining about SCR. Yeah. So how different is L&T and can it sustain for future?
Yeah, so I think Tata Motors is a pretty unique thing. The only ones to really go in for L&T, which to be honest is not as effective as SCR. So you don't have as much of a margin in meeting the norms as SCR. So you're more on the edge. But obviously, you'll be treading that very fine line with L&T. And now L&T is the lean NOx trap, as the name suggests. It's got a kind of a NOx oxidizer. It kind of a catalyst substrate which traps all the NOx. And then there are periods where there's a rich mixture injected into, and that kind of converts the NOx again into nitrogen. So I think you can do it on smaller engines up to around 1.5 liters, which is really the limit. They've done it on the Nexon and the Curve. I don't know if they'll do it on the Safari, on the Sierra, which also is coming out shortly. But it's a very simple system. The fact is you're not burdened by having to put in AdBlue. You don't have to package an AdBlue tank into it. So very less complicated over there.
Cost effective as well.
Cost effective as well. The negatives they say are because you're burning rich, constantly having this rich cycle of fuel to kind of convert the NOx. Your fuel efficiency takes a bit of hit. Your fuel consumption goes down. But honestly, if you see it on the cycle, it's quite negligible. It's not really been much of an issue.
But longevity in BS7 era, do you think it will sustain the L&T technology, or they may have to transition to SCR?
I think, it depends what the regulations are. To be honest, BS7 hasn't been kind of notified yet. What if there is a reduction in NOx? If there is a reduction in NOx, then definitely, I think this is on the limit. They will have to transition on it. But I think, hats off to Tata Motors. It's been a very good technology. I mean, I remember telling, I think it was the Kia product manager that Tata Motors are coming with BS6 without SCR. And he couldn't believe it. He said, not possible. I said, well, that's what they're doing. And sure enough, they've done it. So really
how it has helped Nexon sale.
Exactly. Nexon has been, let's say, a star performer. The diesel, again, is very strong over there. And again, I think over here, you have to even give credit to Delphi. Because Delphi developed the injection system and all, to deliver, to come up with the L&T system. But I think, really good job done by Tata Motors on this.
Right. What was you keep speaking about India being the last man standing when it comes to diesel? Very often, whenever we speak about new regulation, there's always this fear of potential price increases. We are still far off from the BS7 when it's implemented in 2027. How do you see role of diesel beyond that? Is that going to cause a significant price escalation from a consumer standpoint? And from a vehicle maker standpoint, is that too much of a cost to upgrade to the next level?
So I think with every regulation change, there's a culling of certain diesel models. We saw that in BS6. We saw that in BS 6.2. Some diesels just went out of the market completely. So, but I think, honestly, BS7, I don't think it's as stringent or nowhere near the jump BS4 to BS6 was. I think there's a realization that, with the future being more electric, there's no point in penalizing the ICE engine, which just has a few years left. But that was the thinking earlier. I think it's got a longer runway now. So I think the emission focus on reduction of emissions is now more to do with things like PM matter on tires and brakes, where the brake dust also is an issue. And I think the engine, it's not another huge stringent step as it was. So I think, there's still life for diesel in that. And I think you talk to the OEMs, they're quite confident that they can even meet BS7 going forward. And I think the way it is, the handful of manufacturers who have diesel, they realize that they're almost like a monopoly, whether it's Tata Motors, whether it's Mahindra, whether it's Hyundai. And you talk to all of them and say, we will continue diesel as long as there's a market for it. There is no point in taking, it's like a self-goal, just knocking over diesel because for whatever reason, like how Volkswagen did. Completely stupid. But, that company has done some really, kind of senseless things over the years. Their strategy leaves me really bewildered. So these companies will continue selling diesel as long as they can and as long as regulations allow. So I think
that's going to be a critical factor. What the narrative from the center is.
Yeah, that's right. Depending on now, the narrative from the center is we've heard Mr. Gadkari saying that ban diesel and stuff like that. Though he's backpedaled on it. I think from the center, their main problem is the import bill, very very high. So I don't think it's that much the emissions. I think it's the import bill, and that's a valid concern. So then you've got things like biodiesels being developed, and again which have their own challenges. I think it's not easy for anyone in the internal combustion engine business to kind of meet up with the new regulations and requirements. But I think, that is still what is driving a lot of us. And I think, diesel, we have it in our veins. We just have it in our blood somehow. And a certain, category of vehicle, diesel will always have a pretty large market share.
Whenever I analyze the future plans of each of these companies, and when I see that Hyundai, Tata, Mahindra continue to have all powertrains, it gives them that inherent competitive edge.
Exactly.
And when you look at Europeans especially, Renault, Nissan, Renault, Volkswagen Group, Nissan has also given up on diesel. And when you look at their future plans and what future products that we're going to get in the Indian market, which has no diesel option, and they are upgrading to mid-size SUV segment.
Absolutely.
Clearly starting on a back foot.
Totally on a back foot. I think it's really, let's say, it's actually stupid, to have not had a diesel option. That, of course, now they can't bring it back. As I said, the diesel bus has already left. So if you're on it, you're fine. But now to catch it, it's gone. So, and they left, they didn't get onto the diesel bus when they should have, or they got off the diesel bus when they shouldn't have, which was in 2020. Again, driven by let's say, this fear that, diesel is bad or vilified, and just this whole kind of populistic, let's say, vilification in Europe, which made them even knock off diesel in a market like India.
And now they are caught in this conundrum of whether to focus on EVs or on hybrid, because that's the only way that they can stay relevant in that space, thanks to Suzuki and Toyota, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, that's absolutely. And I think, hybrids is going to be the way to go. Is hybrid the new diesel? That's also what we've been, we've done that. In many instances, it is. But still, I think there's a certain application, long distances, cruising, touring. And don't forget, that is happening more and more because the roads are coming. There's a sense of adventure in customers who want to do long distances. I mean, I think if you do a survey, I think Hyundai was saying that the average distance now people do long is around 400 kilometers, post-COVID. So people are actually traveling long distances and going far because we've got the super highways.
And what was just one last thing, I'd like to ask you is also at the top end, the luxury car market. Even there, the share of diesel has again gone up dramatically, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know if it's gone up. I think it's still there, but there is still a demand for diesel for the simple reasons that there is a certain feel diesel gives you, which a petrol doesn't. And at that end, the diesels are so refined that they don't feel like diesels in some way anyway. So the biggest kind of negative, which is the refinement and the noise and all that, they're super refined. And there's a certain punch to it which people like. And again, even in a luxury SUV, people want diesel not because of the fuel efficiency or this little bit of 10 rupee difference or whatever it is they save on per litre, but it's just that torque which they get. The torque over diesel is very, very addictive. Sadly, that punch isn't there. Like I said earlier, the BS4 had that absolute oomph, but it's a lovely, it really makes you feel good. And even a hybrid doesn't give that. It's very linear. It does not you don't get that rush of torque, which you're not going fast, but it just makes you feel good. Yeah,
absolutely. Fantastic, Hormazd. That was an amazing education session for me. And I'm sure a lot of our viewers are very keen to know what is the future of diesel. You answered a lot of my questions. I hope their questions are answered.
Ketan, great. I think it's been a great chat, and I hope all of you all enjoyed again this week's Deep Drive. And we're going to be back again next Saturday, same time, 11 a.m. And so that you don't miss it, keep yourself notified. Click on the bell icon and see you again, same time next week. Bye.